Hi, kids. So, what we are going to be talking about today is one of our five Roman leaders about whom I had you take a opinion stage poll survey to see which one you most closely aligned with from a political point of view, from a values point of view, and just a personality point of view. So, we're going to talk today about Helena Augusta. Helena Augusta, it was a diplomat. She was an archaeologist, and she was a very successful Christian missionary. I do not think it would be overstating the fact to say that Helena Augusta is probably one of the top 10 most influential people in human history. And I'll tell you why I posit that hypothesis as we go through this presentation. So, this is the Roman Empire in the time of Helena. So our story, Ecce Romani, takes place during about 80 after zero. The time of Helena Augusta is around 300 after zero until about 330 after zero. That's kind of like her peak of power or importance. So this is the part, all of these things that are not in green, this is the Roman Empire around the time of Helena Augusta. So, Helena Augusta is from, very much like Julia Domna, she's from the eastern part of the Roman Empire. Okay? And she is, very importantly, the mother of the man named Constantine the Great. Okay. So, who is Helena? Where did she grow up? How did where she came from influence her life? So she was born in Bithynia in Asia Minor in around the middle of the 3rd century after zero. The Roman Bithynia had been part of Rome since 75, so since around the time of our family story. It was a major crossroads of grain, game, coal. It was a port town. It was on the Silk Road. These things should sound familiar because they're very, very similar to the life of Julia Domna. There were big differences between Julia Domna and Helena, though. So she was born ex obscuriore matrimonio, which means she was probably not a legitimate child. She was from a obscure marriage. Helena also did not come from a particularly wealthy or privileged or educated family. So it is actually intriguing and interesting that she catches the eye of the emperor and becomes his, most trusted advisor. So concubine essentially means she wasn't his wife. She was his mistress, but she was his partner. They have a child. The child is Constantine, as we know, Constantine the Great, and he becomes the emperor in 306 after zero. Now, Constantine, we call him Constantine the Great now, but like he was not. He had to fight for Rome, and he fights for the empire against a man named Maxentius. The emperor Maxentius and Constantine fight for dominance over the Roman Empire. She is her son's greatest advisor. She is his strength. She is his linguist. She is his boots on the ground because she comes from the people. And one of the advantages of that is that she speaks many languages and she understands what the everyday person of the Roman Empire is really struggling with. So this all comes to a head. Constantine and Maxentius fight for dominance of Rome in 312 after zero at the Battle of the Milvian Bridge. And she is known to the world then afterward as Nobilissima Femina, or the most noble woman. So how does Helena influence Christianity in the Roman Empire? So here is the reason why I believe that her impact on the world is really inestimable. Okay, so at the Battle of the Mulvian Bridge in 312 after zero, Constantine and Maxentius are fighting for the position of emperor. And the story goes like this: that as Constantine was fighting to be in control of Rome, it all comes down to this bridge. And Constantine has basically nothing left. He's going to lose. This is a great story, right? It's like a classic underdog story. And Maxentius, who was the emperor at the time, he had the whole might of the Roman army behind him, etc. Constantine relates to his mother and to his advisors after the battle that he looked over the bridge and he saw a floating crucifix. A crucifix is a cross. His mother at this time was a Christian. She was a very devout Christian. And her son knew about it from her, though he himself did not convert to Christianity. If he did, it was on his deathbed, like just as a just in case you're real, I declare you as my personal Lord and Savior. It does not appear to be a genuine conversion, but he does legalize it the next year. That's really important for all of world history. So in 312, he sees the cross hanging like in a vision over the bridge, and he hears a voice, and the voice says, "In hoc signo vinces," which means, in this sign you will conquer, because God speaks Latin. So anyway, the idea is that Constantine believed that that was the God of his mother speaking to him. And so he said, "I swear if we win this battle that the insignia of the crucifix will be on all of my helmets and shields, and I will free those who follow Jesus of Nazareth from persecution throughout the Roman Empire." And that's what happens. So she was called a devoted servant of God by her son. In 325, he heads up something called the Council of Nicaea, and this is greatly influenced by Helena's voice and Helena's choice of advisors. And the Council of Nicaea, for those of you who don't know, if your background in your life is not Christian, it's a statement of the things that Christians believe. And prior to this, there was a massive, so many different beliefs about Christianity. A lot of people didn't even believe that Jesus of Nazareth was God. And in Christianity, that's kind of a core belief. But it's only a core belief because it was codified at the Council of Nicaea. So this is also where they determined which books went in the Bible, like all of these different things. So in 327, Helena, after all of the upheaval of her son becoming the leader, Helena takes a trip to Judea, which is the region in which we find the city of Jerusalem. It's an extremely holy location for many, many religions. And she walks through Jerusalem, and she goes and tries to follow the footsteps of Jesus of Nazareth as he was, from stories that we have been told, as he walked through the city to be crucified. Now, he was crucified because he wasn't a Roman citizen, and that was how traitors to the state were killed at that time. The crucifixion was not religious in nature. It becomes religious in nature because of this event. Now, one of the things that's really important to note is that as Helena follows the path of the historical Jesus through the city of Jerusalem, she found different places along her walk that, in talking to the people who lived there, in looking at artifacts and looking at literature, she identifies the spots where people tell her that this is where Jesus stopped and wiped his face and his imprint was on the shroud. This is where Jesus fell for the first time. This is where he fell for the second time. This is where he fell for the third time. This is where the guy had to carry the cross. This is, etc., etc. In many churches, this is called the Stations of the Cross, or the Path of Sadness, Jesus of Nazareth's last path through the city of Jerusalem. So, this is a religion, which means it's based on faith. So, do we know that anything she found is real? We do not. We don't. But one thing I will say is the assassination of Jesus of Nazareth was immediately important. What I mean by that is that the people who cared for Jesus of Nazareth immediately kind of marked certain areas as places that were holy or places where he had stood. And then they continued to pass that down to their children and their children's children, and etc. I make this kind of connection. In Boston is the house of Paul Revere. We know that's Paul Revere's house. Why? Because it was important immediately. Like Paul Revere lived there, and then Paul Revere was famous after we won the Revolutionary War, and then people were like, "Oh, that's where Paul Revere lived," and they like kept passing on through word of mouth, through oral tradition, that this is where Paul Revere lived. Because of that, I feel like it's possible that the artifacts she found are possibly real. I think it is possible that the locations she identifies were real, really were the tomb of Jesus of Nazareth, from which Christians believe he rose from the dead. So it's possible that these places are the real places. It is impossible to say. It was 2,000 years ago. But she found them 300 years after the event. So not so long after. It was very important to her to assist the poor and the needy, and in doing so, she was a missionary. She built churches over all the holy sites. Even today, the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, and I have been to Jerusalem, and I have visited all these places, is built over the hill at Golgotha, where it is believed that Jesus of Nazareth was crucified. She built churches all throughout the city. She built the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. She protected holy sites. She found pieces of the true cross itself, maybe. If you went to every church in the world and put together the pieces of the true cross that exist, you'd be able to build like a barn. So, right? We can't verify that stuff. She identified the spot near the Sea of Galilee where in the Christian beliefs there was a miracle where Jesus of Nazareth took 5 fish and made it 5,000, and same with bread. So she identifies that location and makes it holy. It's near a place called Capernaum, which is really, really beautiful. I've been there as well. She confirmed the place where she believes Jesus stood when he gave his Sermon on the Mount, which is a famous speech. And she marked the place where it is believed in Nazareth, in Nazareth, that the angel Gabriel appeared to Mary and said, by the way, would you be willing to give birth to the Son of God? So that's the belief system. Okay. She also identified other places like where Joseph, the stepfather or foster father of Jesus, worked and lived, where he was born in Bethlehem, the field where the shepherds saw the star, all, etc., etc., etc. So for the record, it's not important to me that you remember all those details. What's important to me is that you recognize that in doing these things, she was living her belief system in such a way that it influenced her son greatly, because her son absolutely trusted his mother. And he absolutely honored her belief system. And this is a radical and permanent change in world power. It is at this point that Christianity spreads like wildfire throughout the whole Roman Empire, throughout the whole Roman world. And this is important because whereas Constantine says Christianity is now legal, 100 years later, the Emperor Theodosius will say, if you don't become Christian, we'll kill you. So then Christianity becomes not just faith, it's law. And there's a lot of good arguments for the idea that those two things should not be the same, which we have here in the United States. So, could there have been an alternative purpose to Helen's trip to Judea? So, as we talked about last year, and we talked about the Roman Forum, and we'll continue to talk about it later this year, in 70 after 0, the Emperor Vespasian sent his son Titus to Jerusalem to get the Jewish people to submit to Roman rule. And the Jewish people said, look, we'll do all the tax paying and stuff. We don't care about that, but like we cannot turn our back on our God. And so the Romans annihilate the Jewish people, and is at that point that they are eliminated from the city of Jerusalem, really for 2,000 years. And Titus burns the Temple of Solomon to the ground. And so that's that is a real point of pain for the province of Judea. They really hold that against the Roman Empire, as they should. So she has to make atonement. She has to apologize and try to make it right. You can't make it right. You can't fix it, but to try to make it right. They provide like protective elements to the Jewish people in throughout the Roman Empire. She educates about the crucifixion of Jesus of Nazareth. She helps to reverse the persecution of the Christians. She is the absolute impetus and inspiration for Constantine's radical religious policy changes. And as someone who is from the Near East, or what we would call today the Judea, Syria area, Helena would have had an intricate, deep part of her soul understanding of the cultural, commercial, meaning trade, and political ramifications of her son's policies throughout Asia Minor. So anything that he might say, I really want to implement this change, he'd run it past Helena first and be like, I need your thoughts on this. Like, what are the things I'm not seeing? Um, and this is where we kind of come to the things where we have to like think about Helena's impact and think about, why do we know the name of Constantine the Great? Constantine the Great is a very commonly known world figure, um, especially among religious circles, because his political policies changed the game globally. But we are missing the why for him because it wasn't faith based for Constantine. He did not believe in Jesus of Nazareth. It was him trusting his most trusted advisor and Helena being worthy of that trust. She could have really manipulated him, and she didn't. So at any rate, this is the end of the Helena presentation, and I hope it made you think a little bit about power and how power is used, and how human relationships can change the face of the world. Okay. Thanks, kids.